Assalamu alaikum fam, hope you're doing fantastic. So, we are continuing our reading of St. Augustine's Confessions. So, one reason why I enjoy reading him is because you perceive his mind to be very introspective, and the questions he asks himself are ones we can also ask ourselves. And you begin to see a sort of human side to the scholars of Catholicism. If anyone is speaking about Catholicism, Christianity, and they do not know who Aquinas is, who Augustine is, that's like not knowing who Muslim and Bukhari are. And you should not be taking knowledge on Christianity from people who have never read the scholars of that faith. Would you trust a Muslim who had never heard of Bukhari and Muslim concerning your knowledge? Right? No, you wouldn't. You shouldn't. The same principle, that is, goes for other religions. Okay? If you want people to have respect for your faith and to study what your scholars say, you need to understand what their scholars say if you're going to open your mouth and speak as an authority on something, right? So, St. Augustine, this work, Confessions, is studied by philosophers and theologians, okay? Historians, and lots of people who are even atheists. Pretty interesting, right? So, never trust a person who will mock what they have not read, insult someone whom they have not read, and do not accept the opinions of anyone when they have not done the hard labor of reading the works for themselves and thinking that Wikipedia is a sufficient replacement. Okay? Very important. Okay, let's begin. With that being said, let's nerd out. In you are the first causes of all things not eternal, the unchangeable origins of all things that suffer change. So here he's calling God the first cause, okay? And everything that is not eternal comes from God, right? So everything that's going to perish comes from God, while God is unchangeable. And they suffer change, but God does not have change. The everlasting reason of all things that are subject to the passage of time. So he's calling God the everlasting reason. And I have no reason in themselves. Okay, so they are subject to the passage of time, but God is eternal, not subject to passage of time. You follow that? Have pity then on me, O God, for it is pity that I need. So here you see the humbleness in his voice here. He isn't haughty, he isn't arrogant, rather he sees his station, and he sees it clearly. Answer my prayer and tell me whether my infancy followed upon some other stage of life that died before it. Was it the stage of life that I spent in my mother's womb? For I have learnt a little about that too, and I have myself seen women who are pregnant. But what came before that, O God, my delight? So he's asking one of the very, deep questions of where were we before we were born? And he's wanting answers. And that's an intense one. Intense, right? And when he points out, he's seen pregnant women, so he's in a different space of time, right? When you see a pregnant woman, that little baby, he doesn't know you exist, but you know he exists somewhere in that womb, right? He hasn't yet entered our reality. It's interesting, he calls the name God my delight, so he delights in God. He's talking very loving to God. Was I anywhere? So here a lot of people have asked this question to themselves. Was I anywhere? Where was my soul? Right? Where was my soul before it went into his mama? Was I anybody? So see, was I anywhere? Was I anybody? deep questions, right? These are questions I must put to you, for I have no one else to answer them. See, so he's contending right here accurately. No one can tell you where you were. No one can answer those questions except God. Neither my father nor my mother could tell me, nor could I find out from the experience of other people. Good point, see? There's some knowledge that only God knows. He cannot find out. I have a little piece of dust right there. How annoying. He cannot find out who he was. Not even his own mother can tell him, right? You can't figure that out. You can't ask someone through experience, where were you? Were you someone? No, you can't answer them. Or from my own memory. So he realizes his memory can't tell him where he was before he came into his mom's womb. Nor does he remember the stay inside his mother's womb. Nor can anyone, through their empiricism, tell him. Right? You might get a crazy person who pretends to know, but still. This is very interesting because it's really showing the beyond. What was beyond when you came into existence? Because he caused us to think about God being the first cause. And the change comes from God to humans. The whole process of change. Being in your mother's womb, going out of the womb, that's change. You know? It's really interesting. Do my questions provoke you to smile at me and bid me simply to acknowledge you and praise you for what I do know? So here it's like to smile at me. It's that comes from pity too, because when you pity something, you're like, oh, there's a bit of love there when it's a friendly pity. When it's like, oh, I pity that person, man. That's quite different. But if somebody is being humble and they say that they're insignificant in front of you, you know, you feel sort of pity in a sort of cute way. Like a mother to a child, you pity the baby, well, you should, when it's crying and it can't help itself. You have pity on the little one, he's crying. You have pity upon the mercy. It depends on the intention behind the pity, whether it's a negative or a positive, but still it is there and it can be loving. Very interesting, right? And praise you for what I do know. So again, he admits what he does not know and knows that God knows everything. Very cool, right? He also mentioned above, which I didn't read to you, just about how watching babies and how they behave. And that he realizes in his infancy, you know, he acted the same. So he does this whole introspection into little babies. It's quite interesting. Very nerdy. What do you think, fam? About his introspection here. Very, very cool. I really find it thought-provoking and potent, especially when it comes to our reality on Earth.